If faith is just in your head, then why does it sometimes show up in your heartbeat, your immune system, even your odds of surviving a hard year? And if it can help, why can it also harm? Tonight I want to treat faith like a measurable force, not supernatural, not untouchable, more like gravity in the mind, invisible, but detectable by the way it moves us. So here's the human question we're really asking. When life becomes uncontrollable, can faith change what happens inside your body? I'm Rowan K. Mercer, and this is the Science Audit. And I want to start where most people actually live, somewhere between wonder and ache. Because if you're watching this around Christmas, or any holiday season, you already know the paradox. The lights go up. The music gets softer. The world starts telling a story about warmth, reunion, meaning. And for many people that story is true. But for others, the season is a magnifying glass. It enlarges grief. It enlarges debt. It enlarges loneliness. It enlarges the absence of someone who should be here. It makes your life feel like a room with one missing chair. So when people reach for faith this time of year, they're not always reaching for answers to cosmic trivia. They're reaching for something more primitive, steadiness. A way to stand up inside uncertainty without collapsing. A way to keep breathing when the future won't sit still. Now I'm going to set a boundary that protects this whole conversation. This episode is science only. I'm not here to prove or disprove any religion. I'm not here to make claims about miracles, revelation, or metaphysical truth. Those questions matter, but they're not questions you can settle with a blood test or an fMRI. What we can do, carefully, respectfully, is ask what changes in measurable human outcomes when people have faith, practice faith, or belong to faith communities. We can ask what mechanisms could plausibly connect a meaning system to physiology. And we can ask where the data breaks, where faith fails, where it backfires, where it becomes a stressor instead of a shelter. But first, we need to define our terms, because faith is a suitcase word. People pack entirely different things into it. Some pack doctrine. Some pack hope. Some pack identity. Some pack fear. For this audit, I'm going to operationalize faith in a way that science can actually touch. Here's the working definition. Faith is confidence under uncertainty plus a meaning framework plus commitment practices. Confidence under uncertainty means you can't fully control outcomes, but you choose a stance toward them. A meaning framework is the story that tells you what matters, what suffering means, what love demands, what death does or doesn't take away. And commitment practices are the things you do repeatedly: ritual, prayer, meditation, attendance, moral commitments, service, confession, singing, fasting, community care. Notice what that definition does. It doesn't require supernatural claims. It doesn't even require certainty. It describes a pattern, a stable model of reality, lived with repetition, often in community. And the reason I'm defining it this way is simple. Your body is not a passive passenger. Your body is a forecasting machine. It constantly predicts what's coming and prepares you to survive it. So if faith changes your predictions, your sense of safety, your sense of control, your sense of belonging, it may change your biology. That's the promise. But we're also going to look at the price. Because if faith can regulate stress, it can also intensify it. If faith can create belonging, it can also create exclusion. If faith can reduce uncertainty, it can also harden into rigidity. So here's our audit checklist for the rest of this journey. 1. What outcomes are actually associated with faith, across mental and physical health? 2. What mechanisms could plausibly explain those associations? 3. What are the confounds? What else could be driving the pattern? And 4. What are the failure modes? Where does faith correlate with harm? And I want you to stay alert with me, because the most dangerous sentence in this entire topic is, science proves that faith is good for you. Science rarely proves in that way. What it does, when done well, is narrow the uncertainty. It tells us what tends to happen, for whom, under what conditions, and why. So let's start with what the research most consistently finds, across large populations, across decades of work, across many cultures, while admitting right up front that the picture is messy. In mental health, many studies find an association between religious involvement or spirituality and lower reported distress, better coping, and higher perceived meaning in life. That doesn't mean faith makes every person happier. It doesn't mean it treats clinical depression or anxiety like flipping a switch. But on average, in many cohorts, people who report some form of religious or spiritual engagement also report certain psychological buffers, a sense that suffering is interpretable, that life is coherent, that you are not alone, that your pain is witnessed by God, by community, by the moral universe itself. Why would that matter? Because the brain hates unresolved uncertainty. Not philosophically, biologically. Uncertainty is expensive. It keeps your nervous system scanning. It keeps your attention hypervigilant. It keeps your body on standby, like a car idling in winter because you don't trust it will start again. So when someone says, "Faith gives me peace," we can translate that into a testable hypothesis. Maybe faith reduces perceived threat, or increases perceived control, or increases perceived support. And when perceived threat goes down, certain physiological systems can downshift. Now, what about physical health? Here the claims get louder, and we have to be more careful. Some observational studies have reported that certain forms of religious participation, often measured as regular attendance at services, are associated with lower mortality risk over time. You will hear numbers thrown around. You will hear strong headlines. But remember, correlation is not causation. A correlation is like noticing that umbrellas appear when it rains. The umbrellas didn't cause the rain. The rain caused the umbrellas. Or more subtly, something else, like weather forecasts, could increase both umbrella use and people staying indoors. In the same way, people who attend services might differ from those who don't in ways that matter for health, social support, smoking rates, drinking patterns, routines, access to help, baseline health that allows them to attend in the first place. So instead of asking, "Does religion magically protect the body?" a better scientific question is, what pathways could connect faith-related life patterns to known drivers of health? And when you ask it that way, 4 mechanism buckets show up again and again. First bucket, stress physiology. Stress is not just a feeling. Stress is a hormonal and neural state. When your brain labels something as threatening, it recruits a whole orchestra: cortisol rhythms, adrenaline, autonomic balance, inflammatory signaling. Acute stress can save your life. Chronic stress can slowly change your body's baseline settings. Think of your body like a home with a thermostat. In a crisis, you crank the heat. That's fine for an hour. But if the thermostat gets stuck too high for months, the system wears down, sleep becomes lighter, inflammation rises, blood pressure trends upward, metabolism shifts. Chronic stress is the thermostat stuck in emergency mode. Faith-related practices, prayer, meditation, confession, worship, chanting, structured reflection, may act on the appraisal process, the brain's act of labeling events as threat or challenge, abandonment or meaning, chaos or story. And appraisal is powerful. 2 people can face the same diagnosis. One body goes into panic. Another body goes into focused resolve. Different chemistry. Different sleep that night. Different inflammation over time. Second bucket, social support. If you strip all the theology away, one of the most robust predictors of health is whether you have people. Not followers. Not vague social contact. People who would notice if you disappeared. People who bring soup. People who show up at the hospital. People who call you when you spiral. Faith communities often provide structured belonging, weekly gatherings, shared language, shared rituals, built-in opportunities to ask for help without inventing a reason. In a crisis, that matters. Because isolation is not neutral. Isolation is a physiological stressor. The body reads social disconnection as danger, because for most of human history, being alone meant being vulnerable. So when studies find health associations with service attendance, it may not be attendance that matters. It may be the fact that attendance is a proxy for being embedded in a network. A network that stabilizes you when you wobble. Third bucket, health behaviors and routine. Many faith traditions discourage smoking, heavy drinking, drug use, or encourage moderation and self-care. Not always, not universally, but enough that it shows up in patterns. And beyond substances, religion can impose time structure: waking, sleeping, fasting, feasting, days of rest. Your biology loves rhythm. Circadian systems, your internal clocks, coordinate hormones, immune activity, digestion, mood. So if faith nudges you into steadier sleep timing, steadier meals, lower substance use, more caregiving, more volunteering, that's not mystical. That's biology responding to repeated inputs. Fourth bucket: meaning, expectancy, and pain. This is where people get uncomfortable because they hear one word and they misunderstand it: placebo. Many people think placebo means fake. But placebo is not fake. Placebo is the brain-body modulation that happens when expectation, context, and meaning change how symptoms are experienced and regulated. If you've ever felt your heart race from a thought, you already understand placebo in principle. A thought is information. Information changes prediction. Prediction changes physiology. Pain is a perfect example. Pain is not a direct readout of tissue damage. Pain is the brain's interpretation of signals, filtered through context, safety, threat, attention, meaning. You can sometimes reduce pain by changing meaning, without denying reality. That's not delusion. That's an evolved control system. So if faith gives suffering a frame, this is not punishment, or this is temporary, or this is held, or this can be used, that frame can alter subjective distress, coping behavior, and sometimes functional outcomes. Again, not guaranteed, not universal, but plausible. Now, before we move on, I want to ask you something that sounds simple but isn't. When you hear, faith helps health, what picture appears in your mind? Is it someone praying alone at night? Is it a choir singing in sync? Is it a community cooking meals for a grieving family? Because the mechanism changes depending on the picture. And that's why intervention research matters, studies where we try to isolate an ingredient. We can't randomly assign people to lifelong belief systems easily or ethically. But we can study practices that overlap with faith: mindfulness, compassion meditation, prayer-like contemplation, meaning-centered therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, which is essentially a secular training in living by values under uncertainty. Mindfulness trains attention and non-reactivity. In metaphor, it's like stepping back from the projector and realizing the scary movie is being cast onto a screen, so you can watch without sprinting out of the theater. Compassion meditation trains warmth towards self and others, which can soften threat responses and improve social connection. Meaning-centered therapies help people, especially those facing serious illness, articulate what still matters, what they still choose, what they still give. ACT teaches you to stop trying to eliminate every uncomfortable thought and instead commit to values-based action. These are not religion in disguise. They're attempts to bottle certain psychological and physiological ingredients that religions often contain. And the evidence suggests these practices can improve stress, mood, and quality of life for many people. Not all. And the effect sizes vary. But the consistent theme is this: when you change how a person relates to uncertainty, you often change their physiology downstream. Now let's slow down and stress test the model, because this is where the intellectual honesty lives. First stress test: confounds. If you find that people who attend services live longer, it might be because healthier people can physically attend. That's reverse causality. It might be socioeconomic status. Communities with resources may have both better healthcare and more stable institutions. It might be cultural factors: diet, family structure, social expectations. It might be personality traits. Conscientiousness predicts both regular attendance and better health behaviors. And then there's measurement. Some studies measure religion as belief, some as practice, some as spirituality, some as community involvement, some as intrinsic motivation, meaning you internalize the values, versus extrinsic, meaning you use religion for status, security, or belonging without internal transformation. Those are different psychological objects. So when someone says, "The science says religion is good," the first response should be, which dimension, in which population, measured how, controlling for what, over what timeline? That's not cynicism. That's respect for complexity. Second stress test, when faith hurts. This matters. There is measurable harm associated with certain religious experiences in certain people. Spiritual struggle, feeling abandoned by God, punished, unworthy, correlates with distress, depression, anxiety. Guilt can become chronic stress. Exclusion and stigma can become trauma. Coercion can fracture identity. Punitive belief models can turn the mind into a courtroom where you are always on trial. And in some cases, faith can intersect with medical refusal or delayed care, sometimes with tragic outcomes. Here we have to be precise. The harm isn't faith as a molecule. It's the specific beliefs, social pressures, and decision structures that shape behavior. So the question isn't, is faith good or bad? The question is, what kind of faith, held in what way, practiced in what environment, inside what nervous system? Because dose and type matter. Private practice can be calming for one person and isolating for another. Communal participation can be supportive for one person and suffocating for another. Intrinsic religiosity, where faith is a lived compass, often correlates differently than extrinsic religiosity, where religion becomes a costume you wear to be accepted. And rigid certainty can sometimes reduce anxiety in the short term while increasing intolerance, or fear in the long term. Here's a thought experiment, and I want you to actually run it in your mind like a simulation. Two people sit in the same church, or the same mosque, or the same synagogue, or the same temple. They hear the same words. They sing the same songs. They share the same doctrine. And yet, one leaves feeling held. The other leaves feeling hunted. Same input. Different outcome. Why? Here's the scientific lever, appraisal. Appraisal is the brain's interpretation layer, the label it puts on an event, safe or unsafe, accepted or rejected, guided or judged. Appraisal shapes the autonomic nervous system, the balance between sympathetic, mobilize, and parasympathetic, restore. It shapes cortisol patterns. It shapes inflammation over time. So faith isn't just content. Faith is also how your nervous system learns to associate certain symbols with safety or threat. A hymn can be a lullaby to one person and a trigger to another. A prayer can be a hand on the shoulder, or a surveillance camera. And this brings us to the frontier questions, the edge of what we understand. Can meaning be quantified beyond self-report? Self-report matters, your experience matters, but it's noisy. We want biomarkers, behavioral proxies, physiological signatures. How do rituals entrain physiology? When people sing together, their breathing can synchronize. When breathing synchronizes, heart rhythms can shift. When movement synchronizes, standing, kneeling, walking, swaying, social bonding chemistry can change. This is not magic. It's collective physiology. And then there's predictability. The brain spends a lot of energy trying to reduce surprise. A ritual is a controlled pocket of predictability in a chaotic world. Same words, same gestures, same calendar. That predictability can lower uncertainty costs. But if the ritual becomes compulsory, policed, or tied to shame, it can raise threat. Which brings us back to Christmas, the paradox in bright lights. This season can be protective, connection, ritual, music, shared meals, charity, remembrance. It can also be risky. Loneliness spikes, substance use rises for some, financial stress tightens, family conflict resurfaces, grief returns like a tide. The same environment can buffer one person and break another. So what do we conclude without overselling, without dismissing, without turning humans into data points? Here's the most defensible scientific synthesis. The measurable health impact associated with faith is largely mediated through stress regulation, social connection, health behavior patterns, and meaning, mechanisms that can exist with or without supernatural claims. Faith can function like an interface between mind and body, a stable meaning model that changes appraisal, and therefore changes physiology downstream. And the deeper reframe is this: your brain is a prediction engine. It doesn't merely react to the world. It continuously guesses what the world will do next, and prepares your body accordingly. When your model of reality is coherent, When it tells you what matters and who has your back, the system often spends less time in emergency mode. When your model of reality is punitive, unstable, or socially dangerous, the system may spend more time in emergency mode. Now the ethical boundary, because this is where people misuse science. Science can measure effects. It cannot validate metaphysical truth. You cannot take a hazard ratio and turn it into a commandment. You cannot weaponize data to shame non-believers. And you cannot romanticize belief as if it is a moral or biological superiority badge. So if you want to apply this, whether you're religious, spiritual, agnostic, atheist, exhausted, hopeful, focus on the ingredients, not the label. The ingredients are available in many forms: community, ritual, contemplation, service, forgiveness practices, and values-based action. And the harm minimizers matter just as much: flexibility instead of rigidity, inclusion instead of exclusion, honesty instead of coerced certainty, and medical care when medical care is needed. Here's a way to turn Christmas, or any season, into a personal, ethical lab. Choose one ritual that increases connection and calm. It could be a weekly meal with someone you trust, attending a service, lighting a candle at the same time each evening, singing, walking, or a few minutes of prayer or meditation. Choose one act of service that is small enough to actually do: send a message, deliver food, volunteer for an hour, help a neighbor. And choose one moment of silent reflection where you don't fix anything, you just notice your breath, your grief, your gratitude, your body. Then observe, like a scientist of your own life. What happens to your sleep? What happens to your irritability? What happens to your cravings? What happens to how quickly you recover after stress? And now, I want to slow down, because this is the part that deserves quiet. Meaning is not outside biology. Meaning is one of biology's most powerful control knobs. A sentence can change your pulse. A song can steady your breath. A community can lower your baseline fear. A story can make pain bearable, or unbearable. So our mystery isn't whether faith defies science. The mystery is how deeply the body listens to the mind, and how the mind listens to the stories it lives inside. Here's the synthesis distilled. Faith, when it provides safety, belonging, and meaning, can measurably shift stress physiology and behavior in ways that often support health. Faith, when it becomes punitive, isolating, or coercive, can measurably increase distress and risk. The same word, faith, contains both outcomes because it's not one thing. Now a takeaway to carry into your own life. Imagine two futures for the next time you get bad news. In one future, you face it alone, improvising meaning in the moment, your nervous system sprinting to keep up. In the other future, you have a practice ritual, words, breath, a phone call, a community, a value you can touch, that tells your body, "We've been here before, and we know how to come back." Which future are you quietly building today? And the next great question, the one that opens the next door, goes like this: if the brain is a prediction engine, and meaning changes prediction, then what do our most cherished memories really do inside us? Are they simply stories about the past, or are they biological instructions for how to survive the future? If you want to keep going, click the end screen. There's a video waiting that picks up this thread and pushes it into a deeper frontier. And if you want more audits like this, careful, compassionate, and fiercely evidence-based, subscribe. It tells the algorithm to send you the next investigation before you miss it. One question for you, and I'd love a simple answer in the comments. When life feels uncontrollable, what practice, religious or not, most reliably changes your body from alarm to steady?